Good, how are you?
Hello. Renee and Brian Cloyd live in Blacksburg, Virginia. They're doing today what they do several times each year, driving a group of college students over 100 miles to rural Appalachia to help repair homes in this impoverished community.
Let's do it.
You want to go head up this way?
The Cloyds are volunteering their time to help other people.
No, don't touch it until you get line. There you go. You have snapped the line, ladies.
But they're also hoping to help themselves.
Someone said there's been a shooting at Virginia Tech. I didn't even think about it. And then something just hit. I turned on the radio just listening, trying to find some news, and I had heard that 22 have been shot and killed at Virginia Tech. And I remember screaming. And I called my mom, because I knew she had a computer, and I said, could you please check on the computer?
On April 16th, 2007, their daughter Austin, a freshman at Virginia Tech, was killed in a shooting rampage that left 33 people dead.
We were trying to call Austin. Every other parent, every other friend was trying to call those students. And I heard from one of the emergency response workers, the most difficult thing for them was to hear the cell phones going off and being unable to answer by just hearing all those cell phones going off over and over. That's what that day was like. It was a day of horror and hopelessness.
Sometimes it's really comforting to be in here. I mean, this is a picture of she and her friend at one of the football games.
You know, the initial emotion when we lost Austin, it's just like the life had been sucked out of us. And not only we had no sense of direction, no sense of how we would ever get past that moment.
The Cloyds kept asking themselves, what next? But try as they might, they just couldn't find an answer.
Life can end so quickly that everything one does, everything one plans for, dreams of, can be gone in an instant. So what's life about?
And I thought, okay, we gotta let people know who Austin is. She's not just a dead person. She was a vital person who was making an impact.
As a high school student, Austin did volunteer work in Appalachia. Her parents hoped that by devoting themselves to her cause, they'd connect with the people who'd connected with their daughter and move their own lives forward.
Most of the people that we meet out here that we work with on their homes, they all have a story. And the story almost always involves tragedy and something that's happened to their family.
Thank you very much for letting us visit with you.
Thank you for doing it.
And it causes me to know everyone has pain. So it helps to put our grief in perspective.
Dawson's favorite quote is, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And if everyone does something, then together we can change the world.
Hey ladies, how's it going? Hey. I don't know how long it takes for people to reflect upon, memories of children that they've lost and feel mostly happy about that memory instead of mostly sad. For me now, it's still mostly sad and maybe a little happy.
Okay, why don't y'all help him so he doesn't cut his fingers off? Stress safety to this man. A lot of people in this world just don't have the confidence of being loved. And I personally feel like I have that to be able to give to others. So coming on trips like this and getting to know these students, I can't do it for Austin anymore. But if I can just give it to one more person, then then they can give it to someone else. Because I don't have her to give it to anymore. right, Jared. So
Okay.
go to the...
Yeah, okay.
Can we really transmit happiness to others? If we do something to make another person happy, do they then do the same thing for somebody else? In fact, new evidence suggests that happiness may be as contagious as the common cold, that it can be passed along from person to person, and that it can travel farther and faster than anyone imagined. This is Framingham, Massachusetts. In 1948, medical researchers began tracking the residents of this town, trying to learn about the behaviors that cause heart disease. Their work continues today. Known as the Framingham Heart Study, it's one of the world's most extensive epidemiological studies, containing 6 decades worth of data on the health of more than 15,000 people. And hidden in this mountain of data is a deep and powerful secret about the nature of human happiness.
Your happiness depends upon whole large clusters of people you don't even know and who you have no way of knowing.
Nicholas Christakis is a physician and a sociologist. He became interested in the Framingham study not because he was interested in heart disease, but because he was interested in social connections.
These individuals had had their social network ties repeatedly assessed over this 32-year period, and as it turns out, had had various aspects of their emotional lives assessed as well. So what we could tell is we could tell who these people were connected to every 4 years or so for 30 years, and we could tell, for example, whether they were happy or depressed or lonely, and in some cases anxious, repeatedly across time.
Using the Framingham data, Christakis and his colleagues mapped out a web of more than 50,000 connections between friends, family, and coworkers who participated in the study. Then they began to calculate how changes in the happiness of any single person affected the happiness of others in this vast web of relationships. The results were astounding.
What we found is that if your friend becomes happy, it increases the probability that you will become happy by about 15%. And if your friend's friend becomes happy, someone you don't even know perhaps, it increases the probability that you'll become happy by about 10%. It's only when we get to 4 degrees of separation, only when we speaking of your friend's 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 friend, that that person's emotional state is no longer associated with your emotional state.
Everyone knows that people can make each other happy. But before this study, no one had any idea just how powerful this effect could be. Christakis' work shows that happiness spreads through social networks like a virus, that happiness is, in a very real sense, contagious. There's no doubt about it. We're all connected. And those connections exert a powerful influence on our happiness. Sometimes they can even save our lives.
I lived here about 40 years ago when I was a kid. Just walking in the door of my house was so unpleasant.
Michael Mattis was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the troubled relationships of his childhood left an indelible mark.
I was an only child. I grew up with my mother and my grandmother. My mother worked 2 jobs as a waitress to support us because my grandmother was home all the time taking care of me. The lid came off that predictable situation by 2 events. My grandmother died, which left us in a void, and then my stepfather came in. And that's when the alcoholism reared its head. My mother would be in bed. My stepfather would be up in a chair with cocktail in hand. My mother would be bedridden for maybe up to a month. And she would even call for me in a drunken tone to bring her a drink or food or something like that. I was, of course, bitter and angry about what was now going on. In essence, I'd lost my mother, the mother that I had known, to this alcoholic life. And that's when I began to really start living more on the streets and started to get into trouble with my friends, my new family. And the trouble started simply with shoplifting, escalated to burglaries, car thefts, so that we were pretty much running around doing what we wanted. Right over here was my friend's house. He used to deal LSD right out of the back of the house there. A good source for all of us at the time. I and my friends, we'd just do everything in our power to find ways to alter our mood. We'd, drinking, drugs, LSD, speed, you name it. It was pretty much anything we can get our hands on. Right up here on the left is a house that we were all holed up in, and we were busted up there by a very spectacular bunch of police outside, and they had us right over here in front of this house, all of us pinned down, handcuffed on the ground. I was arrested 24 times total. The vast majority of that was for car theft, occasional break-ins, and other sorts of misdemeanors, drunken behavior, disorderly stuff, and the like. But I remember every time going down to the juvenile detention center with its drab green cement walls and just a profound sense of depression that would occur within me and just the hopelessness. And to this day, I can remember the deep, gut-wrenching depression that I would come over me in a wave. I don't know what the future holds. I had a meeting with my parole officer after I'd been arrested one more time subsequently. And I was sitting in the car outside the high school, and he told me, "You're done. One more arrest, and you're going to be tried as an adult." I had at least the insight to know that if I stayed in this environment, I was going to get in trouble again.
Although many of his friends would soon be in prison, fate had something different in mind for Mattis, whose life was changed forever by a single social connection.
I got a job at a very high-end furniture store that sold very expensive modern furniture. It's an environment that allowed me to learn a lot about the other side of life, where there was money, culture, art, wine, and the like. And this is something I had not experienced before, so it allowed me to become aware of this as a possibility. But the real transition for me in terms of helping to guide me came through fluke interaction that I had in delivering furniture to a surgeon. It was a very big job that we had, and I ended up going out there multiple times to install custom-made furniture. And so I got to know him. For whatever reason, he saw something in me, and he decided to take me under his wing.
My first impressions of Mike when he first came in the door, there was a spark there that was blatantly obvious to me. And his persistence in pursuing our relationship was conspicuous, and it was infectious.
I write a letter to the dean of the medical school. I mean, it makes no sense. I wouldn't do it today.
Right. I would go out to his house on Saturdays and just hang out with him, and he might take a nap on the couch while I would sit there and watch football or something. But when it came time for me to ask him questions and get some guidance, he always gave me the right advice.
He said, I had a difficult time even getting a high school diploma, and I haven't been to college, and I can't read, and I can't add a column of numbers together. And my response to that was, well, just do it.
He saw worth in me, and it could be developed. And that was what decided my fate. I'm a full professor of thoracic surgery in the Department of Surgery at the University of Minnesota. And I landed upon surgery when I got onto the rotation as a medical student. All of a sudden, here we are in a high adrenaline environment, risky activity, life and death, all the things that were certainly embedded in me and my past and how I grew up. I fit in just perfectly.
The story of Mike's life illustrates beautifully what happens in childhood, and going down a dark road doesn't doom you. That you can turn your life around, and you can construct a new life with the help of other people.
Psychologist Ann Maston studies how children respond to adversity. She became interested in Mattis because of the way he used his adult relationships to overcome a troubled youth.
He encountered people who began to care about him. He connected with mentors who opened doors for him and coached him. Yeah, we probably should check with up close, but why don't you?
For almost 30 years, Maston has been working on a study that tracks over 200 people, many of whom, like Mattis, grew up in difficult circumstances.
We recruited them when they were 8 to 12 years old, and then we followed them up after about 7 years, 10 years, and then 20 years. We wanted to study what was happening both when things were going well and when things were not going so well. And we learned a lot about the nature of stress that kids encounter, and also about all the kinds of protective factors that seem to make a difference in children's lives.
Maston's findings tell us that the key to overcoming childhood adversity lies in developing strong relationships with competent and caring individuals, regardless of how or when we meet them.
When you're young, they're parenting type figures. When you're older, they can be mentors, friends, romantic partners.
Any concerns or issues? You got any pains? Anything new overnight?
In Mike's case, these kind of people came into his life late when he was at the doorstep of adulthood. And he was optimistic, even though he probably didn't have too many reasons to be optimistic. And I think people around him responded to that, to his motivation and interest in going in a new direction. And I think what you see in his life is a kind of a positive snowball.
Okay.
When I reflect back about how did this happen, how did I manage to make a success out of this mess? I go back to the observation of others and using those as significant opportunities for personal development. Without a doubt, one of the most important things that bring me happiness is being engaged in my family, in taking care of them, in fostering my children's development, in being a good husband to my wife. These are sometimes trite comments that people make, you know, being a good husband, being a father, and all that stuff, but I actually mean it, and it's something I came to learn. It wasn't something that was just immediate. For me, happiness means being engaged in things that involve other people and being committed to something that is about other people.
Social connections are clearly the key to happiness. That's a cause for celebration, but it's also a cause for worry, because as people age, their social networks get smaller and smaller, which suggests that the older we get, the unhappier we should become. And yet, surprising new evidence reveals it's usually the other way around.